At 6:23 a.m., the revolving door at Lakeview Memorial stuttered against a gust off the lake. The air bit. The lobby smelled faintly of coffee and disinfectant. Fluorescent tubes hummed a thin electric note that seemed to climb into the skull and sit there. Dr. Nora Vale put her badge to the reader and felt the small vibration as the lock clicked. Her hair was lashed into a bun that did not move. She wore the same navy scrubs as everyone else, the same white coat. The only odd thing was a brushed titanium ring on her right hand. Inside the band, hidden from sight, shallow numbers pressed against skin. She tapped the ring once on the counter, a tiny metal tick. Dr. Vale said Bennett Cross from the central station. His voice carried without effort, silver hair combed like he slept in a wind tunnel. The board behind him glowed with the day's cases. You are the one who did undergrad online. Several residents at the coffee urn pretended not to listen, their shoulders tilted. Non-traditional path, Nora said. How old are you? 34. Most interns are 26. Cross skimmed her file on a tablet. You try something else while the rest of us learn medicine. Nora let the hum of the lights fill the gap. I worked. I decided this was what I wanted. He lifted a brow without looking up. You will observe today. Appendectomy for a service member. Straightforward. A nurse slid a chart toward Nora. She read on her feet. SPC, Jake Nolan, 23, right lower quadrant pain, low-grade fever, nausea, WBC up, CT suggestive of appendicitis. Notes from triage. Recent deployment to Coast Afghanistan 18 months ago. Unintentional weight loss. Night sweats. She felt the ring turn, a small grind of metal against skin. Nora lifted her gaze. Has anyone considered peritonitis from a retained fragment? Cross finally looked at her. His expression did not change, but the other residents went very still. Based on what? Pattern. History. The weight loss is not explained by mild chronic GI distress. The night sweats, the location. Imaging can miss small fragments. They migrate. They wall off. Thank you, Cross said. He closed the tablet. The snap sounded like a gavel. You will observe from the gallery. Dr. Chen assists. Maya Chen stepped forward, tie already tucked. The hint of a smile lived in one corner of her mouth. Polite, competitive. Dr. Vale Cross said, eyes already back on the board. Try not to invent rare pathologies before you have scrubbed your first case here. Nora nodded once. She did not argue. She turned and walked the long hall toward the lockers. The floor was polished enough to catch the ceiling lights in thin bands. In the changing room, the air smelled like iodoform and the faint ghost of someone's citrus lotion. Metal doors clanged in soft echoes. She turned the ring to the inside of her hand and slipped on hospital greens. The fabric was rough at the seams. She tied the drawstring fast, a motion too efficient to notice if you were not watching for it. The mirror gave her an unremarkable outline. The hands in the reflection belonged to someone else. Scars at the knuckles, the way the tendons rose when she flexed. She washed in the scrub room and watched the water move. Not fast, not slow. At the end she stood a second longer than necessary and made the stream go cold. It woke the bones. The OR gallery was cold and high. Through glass O3 lay under domed light. Instrument trays gleamed. A scrub tech counted quietly, each clamp placed like a bit of punctuation in a line of text. The anesthesiologist adjusted a ventilator hose with 2 fingers light as a pianist. The monitors breathed a steady metronome beep. Nora took the seat at the back, near the shadow line where the gallery lights did not reach. She tucked her coat behind her, then folded her hands on the rail. The ring pressed into the soft meat under her fingers. She moved it until it stopped biting. They wheeled Jake Nolan in at 7-Eleven. He was young and trying not to be, shoulders tight even with sedation, eyes wide for a second, then gone. A tattoo peeked from beneath the band of the blood pressure cuff, the ink half hidden by tape. Cross came in with his gown already tied by a circulating nurse. He greeted the room without looking at anyone in particular. Textbook, he said to the air to the glass to himself. Scalpel, said the scrub tech. The blade flashed. Skin split with a buttered sound. Layer by layer, Cross moved with clean economy. Small suction, retraction. He did not speak much. When he did, the sentences were only verbs and instruments. Nora watched his hands. She did not watch the hands to learn the technique. She watched to understand what he thought was there and what he did not expect to find. On the monitor, Nolan's numbers drifted a little. The ventilator bellows kept time. The pressure settled, then ticked down 2 points. Up 1, down 3, No one looked up. Inflamed appendix cross said, not perforated. Lap sponge, the tech said. Nora felt the shift in her own breath before she noticed the numbers. The pulse rate read 112, then 118. The pressure dropped 5 points in 20 seconds. A nurse called for more fluids in a voice that was calm because calm was the job. It is anesthesia, Cross said. Nora's hand tightened on the rail. She placed her fingers like a clamp and felt the cold of the metal through the skin. Her other hand found its own position as if it held a retractor that was not there. A piece of hair tickled under the cap. She did not move. Down on the floor, Sam Ortiz glanced up from the Mayo stand. He was broad in the shoulders, eyes quick and quiet. Years of work lived in the tiny, unhurried way he set a forceps. He saw Nora's posture through the glass. He saw how her elbows had locked. He had seen that stance before somewhere without glass. The abdomen looked clean from the view the camera offered. The appendix was lifted, ligated cut. Cross's stitch was even tight. But the distension did not improve. The pressure slid not in a dramatic line but in soft steps down a staircase. BP 90 over 58, a nurse said. Bolus, Cross said. His voice stayed flat. We are almost done. Nora felt the ring twist. Inside the smooth band, the numbers pressed. She could feel where one coordinate ended and the next began like braille no one else could read. The gallery chair creaked as she stood. She moved. The door to the gallery swung and cut the hum of the room in half for a breath. In the scrub bay, the sensor on the soap dispenser lit up and released a cold, clear ribbon into her palm. She scrubbed like they had taught her, but her hands moved faster. Not sloppy, just fast. The motion had weight and angle and exactness from repetition until the body remembered when the mind was somewhere else. Inside, O3 Cross's voice rose one notch. Where is the source? Not seeing active hemorrhage, said Dr. Chen. She sounded like someone who was thinking three things at once and choosing one to say out loud. The scrub nurse at the door looked at Nora, then at the caseboard, then back at Nora. You are not on this, she said, already reaching for the towel to dry the wet from Nora's forearms. I know, Nora said. She kept her arms up, hands high, fingers spread. She turned so the gown could be tied. The towel brushed fast. The gown settled. Sam was there, not needing to be called, holding out gloves in the right size. His eyes flicked to her face, then to her hands, then away. Cross looked up as Nora stepped into the light. His expression snapped like a reflex. Out. She moved to Nolan's left side. She did not answer. She took in the abdomen, the margins, the screens. The smell told her the rest. Beneath antiseptic and the copper note of blood. Something older, sour, and low, a smell that did not belong to a fresh incision. Dr. Vale, Cross said, You do not enter my room. Nora met his eyes. He was not a bad surgeon. He was a good one who knew his map and stayed on the road. The problem was that the other road was not on his map. This is not bleeding, she said. This is sepsis. There was no space left in the room. The monitors beat on. The lights hummed their thin wire song. The ring pressed steady against her skin. She set her hands where they needed to be. The room did not make space for argument. Nora set her palms at the edge of the drape eyes on the field. The smell beneath the antiseptic was wrong, low, and stale like a wet coin left in cloth. She spoke without raising her voice. Retractor. Maya Chen hesitated for the length of one breath, then slid the instrument into Nora's open hand. The steel felt cold through the glove. Nora leaned a fraction to change the angle of light, a small tilt that pushed a soft shadow across the left upper quadrant. Shadows tell relief. Relief tells density. Her hands began to move. Pressure is 68 over 38, a nurse said. More fluids, Cross said. We are closing. We are not closing, Nora said. She reached with her left hand fingers, walking the peritoneal surface with patient pressure. The tendons in her wrist stood out. She pressed and released in a pattern that made sense only to her. The ring on her finger bit once against the joint. She adjusted without looking at it. Tell me what you think you feel, Cross said. It was not a question asked with curiosity. He kept working as he spoke, the tip of his instrument neat, the gesture exact. Capsule, Nora said, thickened. The tissue does not spring back the same. She stopped, placed 2 fingertips on one spot, then moved them a centimeter and stopped again. Here. Cross leaned. The surface looked smooth. There was nothing to see. You will not see it, Nora said. Palpate there, gently. He touched the point she indicated. His eyes changed a degree. He felt it too. A resisting give, like pressing a knuckle into a pocket stuffed with lint. Small extension, Nora said. 2 centimeters, irrigation ready. Sam was already holding the irrigator. He had moved when her shoulders shifted. He placed it by her right hand like he had always intended to. His eyes were steady and quiet. Nora extended the incision by a measured notch, not the way Cross would have, but clean. She widened the opening with the retractor, then slid 2 fingers in and down. The pressure she used was not force. It was commitment. Her face was unreadable. Got it. She said the word more breath than voice. She withdrew her hand. A sliver of metal lay on her glove, irregular and filmed with fibrous tissue. It rocked once in the light, then sat still in the curve of latex. The scrub tech held out a specimen cup lid already cracked. Metal hit plastic with a small tap. The sound carried more than it should. Broad-spectrum antibiotics now, Nora said. Pip-tazovanc start. She nodded to Maya. Irrigation. They washed the pocket until the fluid ran clear. The smell changed. The pressure began to creep back up. The monitor beeped in a more even way. Cross followed what needed doing. He did not argue. Nora laid sutures fast, vertical mattresses placed with spacing that looked slightly wrong until you understood the purpose of holding strength under stress. Maya watched the needle. She watched the line of each knot. The rhythm was not from a textbook. It was a metronome set to risk. BP is 78/48, the nurse said, climbing. Nora tied the last knot with a flick the hand remembered without thinking. She lifted her head. He will need ICU monitoring, cultures, watch for rebound. But he is coming back. Cross did not answer. He was looking at the specimen cup as if the clear lid could speak. Then he looked at Nora and did not know what to say. He stepped back from the table. They transferred Nolan with a careful efficiency born of long practice. The OR settled into its end-of-case cadence. The metal tray clinked. The suction hissed. The light overhead buzzed with a faint thread of wire song. In the scrub room, the water was hot enough to pink the skin. Steam climbed. Nora stood at the sink with her hands under the stream. She let the heat fade to cold and back again. The ring clicked softly against the edge of the basin. Sam took the sink beside her. He washed with the same care as if he were going back in. "Where did you learn to find that with your fingers?" he said. His voice was even, almost idle. Nora watched the water roll off. Practice. "In places where the lights cut out," he said. He turned off the tap, shook once, reached for the towel with his forearm to keep his hands up. "I have seen that hand angle." Maya came in, mask hanging at her throat, hair damp at the temples. Her face was bright and conflicted at the same time. That was, "I have never seen someone do that in under a minute." She folded her arms to keep from fidgeting. "Where did you train?" Nora pulled her hands away from the water. The air was cold on her skin. "Here," she said. "Now." The speaker clicked. Dr. Raymond Adu's voice filled the room, calm and compressed into the tin of the overhead. "Good work on O3. ICU is ready. Keep lines in place. Also, all available staff to emergency. Reported mass casualty. Red line derailment near Merchandise Mart. ETA 4 minutes. The 3 of them were moving before the message ended. The scrub room door swung back and the hallway air met them cooler and threaded with the coffee smell from a cart down the corridor. Nora grabbed a fresh pair of gloves and a trauma shears for her pocket. She pushed her ring tight against her palm so it would not catch. In the ER, the all-hands mood had already taken shape. Beds were stripped, plastic was taped down, crash carts checked once, then again, nurses barked short sentences, the auto doors hissed and let in winter air and siren noise from outside. Ambulance 1 rolled in hard, a teenager strapped down, face pale under a grid of dust. Her chest rose unevenly, her neck muscles stood out with each breath like cords under skin. Female 16, the medic called. Shortness of breath since the scene, deteriorating en route. Suspected tension pneumo, O2 sat in 70s. BP 90/60. Bay 4, someone said. Bennett Cross cut through with a hand gesture. "Dr. Vale, take this. Stabilize, minimal resources." Nora caught the gurney at the corner and ran her hand along the girl's sternum without thinking about it. The ribs rose more on one side than the other. The trachea might have been a hair off center, or it might have been the angle of the light. The girl's eyes skittered without landing. 2 liters oxygen. I need a 14 gauge. Chlorhexidine. Tape. Someone hold her shoulders. A nurse clipped open a package and dropped a needle into Nora's palm. The metal felt heavy and exact. The girl was trying to speak and could not make anything that was words. Her lips were purple at the edges. Nora palpated the second intercostal space at the mid-clavicular line. She cleaned the skin in a quick circle that left brown shine. She set the needle and felt for the right angle. "On you," she said. On you, the nurse repeated and pressed down on the girl's shoulders to keep her still. The needle slid. A moment later, air rushed into the syringe with a hiss that felt like the room exhaling in relief. The girl's chest moved easier. The numbers flowed upward 82, 87, 91. The girl's eyes focused on something in the ceiling and stayed. Chest tube kit, Nora said. We need to place it before it reaccumulates. A voice to her left spoke low. That was Battlefield Quick. Nora turned her head. A woman stood just out of the way, dark hair pulled tight, a med student badge clipped to her pocket. Her hands were still with the kind of quiet that keeps tools from ringing. TCCC taught. Get me the kit, Nora said. The woman nodded once and went. The auto doors opened again and brought in 3 more stretchers and a man who walked himself. He waved off the paramedic with a stubborn twitch of the hand. He was in his late 50s with the kind of posture that said he had been trained to stand like that. He pressed gauze to a cut on his forehead, not quite smiling. I am fine, he told the clerk at the desk. Give the beds to the kids. I need a couple of stitches. He breathed like he did not want anyone to see it. Nora glanced across. The man favored his left side a fraction. The chest rise was shallow. He kept his hand near his ribs like something inside hurt more when he forgot it. Focus, the nurse at her shoulder said softly. Tube. The kit hit the gurney. Nora opened it, gauze wrappers popping under her fingers. She marked the 5th intercostal space with her thumb and made a small incision. The cut gaped. The smell of trapped air and sweat pushed out. Her hand dug to find the pleural space, the pop. When she reached it more feel than sound, she guided the tube home and watched for fog in the line. It came. The monitor sat, climbed into the 90s, and held. Secure, she said. Film when you can. She tied the tube with a lace of silk that looked too simple to hold but held. She glanced up to check the man again. He was at the registration desk, answering questions with patience and a faint humor that he probably used to calm people. He took one step, then another, then put his hand to his chest. His face went white and then emptied. He fell like a tree falls, not dramatic, just a hard decision by gravity. The sound of his body on the floor cut through everything. Code blue, someone shouted. Nora moved. The space between her and the man was 30 feet. It felt shorter because she did not think about distance. The ring hit the metal side of the crash cart as she grabbed for it, a dry tick that announced itself to no one but her. She knelt and checked for a pulse at the carotid. Nothing. No chest rise. She started compressions, her hand set at the sternum, heel over heel, arms locked. Pads Bennett Cross said from somewhere above her. Rhythm when ready, epinephrine drawn. It is not an MI, Nora said. She counted compressions aloud, 30, then 2 breaths delivered by a bag valve mask that arrived just as her count hit the number. The skin around the man's lips looked too pale. What do you mean not an MI, Cross said. He was peeling open defibrillator pads. Delayed cardiac tamponade from a migrating fragment, Nora said. Her voice stayed level. He walked in small head wound, guarding the left side, shallow breaths. If he has a history that includes blasts, a fragment can shift with trauma. It will pierce the pericardium and bleed into the sac. The pump fails because it cannot fill. How in the hell, Cross began. Ultrasound, said the med student at Nora's shoulder. She had appeared with a portable unit gel bottle already in hand. I have it. I know the view. Nora did not stop compressions to look at who she was talking to. Parasternal long axis. Keep your angle steady. The probe touched gel and then skin. The screen bloomed with grain and pulse. The heart lay there in black and white, half shadow, half light. A dark crescent held tight around it, thicker than it should be. Effusion, the student said. Large. Cross looked at the screen. The noise of the ER fell away in his head. My God, he said, but quiet. Pericardiocentesis, Nora said. 16 gauge long, syringe, sterile gloves. Sam Ortiz was there. No one had called him. He had felt the way the air in the room had gone thinner and had moved. He clicked a long needle onto a syringe and primed it, then put it where Nora's hand would be. Subxiphoid approach, Nora said. She kept compressing because nothing else she could do would move blood. The student held the probe in place, wrists firm, picture steady. When the kit was ready, Nora traded compressions for the needle and Cross took over the count without needing to be asked. Nora set the needle just below the tip of the sternum and aimed toward the left shoulder. The gel made the skin slick under her glove. The room held its breath. She pushed. The needle advanced under the shimmer of gel. On the screen, the bright tip kissed the dark crescent that hugged the heart. Nora felt the change through the shaft, a tiny loss of resistance like a door unlatched. She pulled back on the syringe. Blood came slow at first, then with a heavy slide that filled the barrel. The color sat almost black. Sam swapped syringes without words. Nora kept the angle true and drew again. The screen loosened as the crescent thinned. The rhythm on the monitor, which had been a messy line, gathered into something that could push. Organized tachycardia, Maya said. Her voice carried relief that she did not show in her face. The man on the floor tried to breathe. The first breath came shallow. The second had weight. Nora withdrew the needle and pressed gauze over the puncture. She looked up. Name, she said. The unit clerk held up a card. Rourke, Thomas. He is our liaison, retired colonel. Cross stood a step back, defibrillator pads in his hands that would not be needed. His eyes went from the screen to Nora to the man. He closed his hands and slid the pads back into the wrapper. How did you know, he said. Nora placed 2 fingers at Rourke's neck and felt the pulse tap under the skin. Presentation, she said. History, posture, breath. The med student with the probe held it steady while the picture settled. She had gel on her wrist and a focus that did not scatter. There is still fluid, but much less, she said. I'm seeing a bright echo near the right atrium. That is not artifact. Foreign body, Nora said. She wiped the gel from the tip of the probe and met the student's eyes for the first time. The student was already nodding. Ellie Park, she said. 3rd year, prior Air Force medic. Rourke's eyes opened a slit. He looked at Nora as if the shape of her voice had crossed time. You, he said, a rasp that barely made sound. Nora leaned close. Do not talk yet. You are in the ER at Lakeview. Stay still. He tried to smile. It flickered. The pulse under Nora's fingers held. Cross crouched. If that fragment sits against the atrium, we need to take it now, he said. He glanced toward radiology as if sheer will could bring a room that was not ready to life. Or one, Nora said. Cardiac setup. We will need cross-clamp capability and perfusion standby. I want Rebo A for time. Cross's mouth tightened. That is not standard here. It buys a controlled window if the wall tears, she said. Zone 1 occlusion 45 minutes. We will not need all of it. Adu arrived at the edge of the circle with 2 nurses and a list already forming in his head. His presence steadied the energy of the space. He took in the scene, the needle, the screen. The man with a gauze square on his chest. You can do this, he said to Nora, not as a challenge. Yes, she said. He turned to Cross. Get the room. She leads. Cross looked like someone had thrown a glass of cold water in his face. Then he stood up and began to issue orders at speed. Sam femoral sheath kit. Ariboa catheter fluoroscopy. Maya book. Or 1 cardiac nurse's anesthesia with battlefield experience if available. Ellie, stay on that view and document the effusion. We are moving in 2. Rourke squeezed Nora's wrist with a short pulse of pressure. Doc, he said, rough. Coast. Your voice was calm and sand. Nora tucked the corner of the gauze in place. We will talk after, she said. They rolled him. The hall lights flashed across his face in passing bands. The smell of the ER fell away, replaced by the colder air of the surgical wing. The whistle of the ventilator on a gurney to their right matched the squeak of a wheel that needed oil. Nora kept her hand on Rourke's shoulder where he could feel it. In the scrub room, the faucets started themselves. Water hit metal. Nora scrubbed to the elbows. Her ring clicked against the steel, once quick and light. She turned it so the numbers rested against skin. Cross scrubbed beside her and did not speak. In OR 1, everything was ready. The overhead lights pooled in white circles. Perfusion stood by. Anesthesia checked lines. The cardiac nurses laid out instruments in rows that looked like a sentence written in a language only hands could read. Nora went to Rourke's side and put her palm on the femoral triangle to feel the pulse. It thudded under her glove, strong enough for access. We will start with the artery, she said. Zone 1. Sam had the 7 French sheath in his left hand and the guide wire in his right already opened onto a sterile field. He placed them on the drape where Nora's hand would find them. Maya stood opposite retractor-ready eyes on Nora's face. Ultrasound for access, Nora said. Keep the angle shallow. I want a straight line. Ellie Park was at the portable unit, again probe in a sterile sleeve now gel glistening on its tip. She held the image of the femoral artery stable. Nora inserted the needle, watched the flash of dark red, then advanced the wire in a smooth motion that looked like no effort at all. The sheath slid over the wire. The catheter followed. Fluoro, Cross said. The screen lit and showed the ghost path inside the body. The catheter snaked up the iliac into the aorta higher. The little balloon sat there deflated, bright as a seed. Zone 1, Nora said. Now. Sam turned the stopcock. Nora inflated slowly. The line on the screen grew into a soft circle, then a proper disc. The pressure at the radial line changed. The perfusionist watched the numbers and gave a short nod. Occluded, he said. Clock, Nora said. The anesthesia tech flipped a timer so the minutes could be seen. Nora looked at each face in the room, then down at Rourke. His eyelids fluttered under sedation. The echo of the earlier breath still lived a little in his chest. Scalpel, she said. The blade went into her hand with a small slap of glove on handle. She drew the first cut without waste. The sternal saw came into view. The nurse connected the hose and laid the handle in Nora's palm, the weight familiar. The room felt smaller by a degree. The hum of the lights rose and then settled. Stay with me, Nora said to the team. The saw began to sing. The saw lifted bone dust into the air, a chalk smell under antiseptic. The sternum opened in a clean line. Retractors spread with a slow gear sound. The heart came into view inside the pericardial sac, a living fist under film. Pericardium, Nora said. Scissors touched the membrane and it opened. Fluid rose and ran. The heart beat freer. On the right side near the atrium, a bright speck sat half buried in tissue. The metal was dull with age and brighter at its edge. Fragment, Maya said a whisper that did not carry beyond the mask. Zone 1 is holding, the perfusionist said. The timer read 7 minutes. Nora set her left hand just so, a light support at the base. She looked at Cross. When it comes out, the wall will tear. I will repair without pause. Count aloud. He nodded. His eyes did not leave the place where metal met muscle. Forceps, Nora said. Sam placed the instrument. The handle settled into her palm with a rightness that felt older than the room. She eased the forceps under the fragment. It resisted a fraction, then let go, slipping free with a thin scrape that only she felt through steel. Blood welled from the opening dark and bright at once. It filled the space fast. Nora had the needle in her other hand before the first bead rose. The suture went in, out, draw, advance. Cross counted without thinking he had decided to do it. 1, 2, 3. Nora did not look up. She felt the curve of the needle bite and come true. Her wrist moved in a small arc, precise and repeatable. The thread flowed. Her breath came even. 7, 8. The tear cinched under the line. Blood still leaked, but less. The next pass closed the last of the gape. 12. The final throw locked. She cut the tail. The pool went from surge to seep to sheen. 13, Cross said, quiet as if talking to himself. Silence arrived in a small wave. Then the monitor spoke in steady beeps. The perfusionist called pressures with a voice that had calm in it again. Deflate, Nora said. Sam turned the stopcock. The balloon shrank on the screen. Flow returned to the lower body. The pulse changed in the radial line, a stronger push. Check for other defects, Nora said. She ran her fingertips over the surface in a gentle search that would find weakness by feel if there was any. There was none. Ellie held the probe at the edge of the field and kept the image clear. The sac looked clean. No fresh pocket formed. She let out a breath that fogged her sleeve. Good, Nora said. She looked at Cross. Close pericardium as you prefer. Sternum with wire, standard. He stared for a second more, then nodded and moved hands sure. Maya set the next instrument without being told. Sam laid the sternotomy wires down in a neat row. Nora stepped back. She checked the timer, then the Rebaouet catheter still in the femoral artery, then the arterial line tracing. She took in every face. She said nothing because there was nothing to add that would not waste seconds. The fragment sat in a cup on the back table. It looked small and ordinary, a pebble that had been in the wrong river too long. Ellie drifted to it and looked for a heartbeat, then went back to the screen. Do not let him get cold, Nora said to anesthesia. Keep the warming blanket at full. He will need ICU bed now. Already called, the anesthesiologist said. The wires tightened over the sternum. The sound was a soft twist, little clicks in a sequence. The retractors came in. Layers began to close. Nora stripped her gloves and let the mask hang under her chin. Her skin felt too cool against the air. She looked at Rourke's face. Sedation had made it still. A flicker under his eyelid said he was somewhere between here and deeper. Cross finished the last knot and cut the tail. He placed his scissors on the tray with care. He looked over the drape at Nora. "Thank you," he said. Nora gave a small nod. "Team effort." Sam smiled with his eyes. Maya's shoulders dropped a fraction as the last suture held. Ellie slid the ultrasound back on his cart, careful with the cable. They moved Rourke to the gurney in practice sequence. Lines and tubes arranged, monitors secure. The unit doors banged once as the team pushed toward the elevator. The corridor felt colder in the wake of adrenaline. The scent of iodoform followed, thinned by air. Nora stayed long enough to watch the gurney turn the corner. She stood alone in the light for a count of 3, then walked to the scrub room. Water met her hands with heat first, then cool as she turned the handle. The ring clicked against steel and made a sound like a tiny bell. She turned it so the inside pressed skin. Heat rose into the air and fogged the mirror a little at the bottom edge. She watched the fog gather and slide. In the hall, voices moved past in a ribbon, most of them low, all of them certain. A nurse laughed once at something small and real, then hushed. A stretcher wheel with a bad bearing squeaked once and then stopped. Nora shut off the water and reached for a towel with her forearm. Fabric dragged against skin. She dried from fingertips to elbow and let the towel drop into the bin. The room felt very quiet. She listened to it for a moment. The quiet was not empty. It was full of things that had found their places. She pushed the door and stepped back into the corridor, the shadows of the overhead lights falling in neat bars across the floor. 6 days reshaped the building in quiet ways. Nurses who had not looked up before now lifted eyes when Nora stepped to a desk. Residents stopped speaking mid-sentence when she entered a room and then pretended they had not. In ICU, Thomas Rourke learned to call breath to the bottom of his lungs again. He thanked each nurse by name. He slept with a warm blanket and woke with a monitor that chimed in a kind rhythm. On the 6th morning, Bennett Cross called Nora to his office. The blinds were half open. Lake light turned the walls pale. A file sat on the desk thicker than a residency application and stamped in places that did not belong to hospital paper. "Sit," he said, not unkind. She sat. The ring pressed the inside of her finger with a steady weight. Cross kept his hands flat for a moment, then lifted one palm and set it on the file as if he was settling dust. "I owe you an apology," he said. The words had no ceremony. "For the way I spoke. For the way I did not look." Nora held his eyes. The hum of the building came through the vents in a soft thread. She did not let him off with a nod and did not make him kneel with a silence. He opened the file. It took phone calls and a person at the Pentagon who wanted to know why. "I got this 2 hours ago." He slid a document across the wood. The paper smelled faintly of toner and something older that lived in cabinets. The report was clean typeset and scarred with black where lines had been hidden. The words that remained told enough. Coast Province 2019. Perimeter breach at a forward aid station. Intelligence held up by interagency dispute. Evacuation delayed. Medical staff operated under fire. 4 died in the window, the report called failure of coordination at senior level. 8 lived. Performance of surgical team exceptional under conditions beyond control, Nora read. Her eyes tracked even lines. Her jaw tightened once. The ring turned without her meaning it to and then stopped. She set her fingertip on one coordinate inside the band and breathed out. The room did not sway. Her voice stayed level. "It does not change what happened," she said. "No," Cross said. "It changes where you set the weight." He closed the file. "I want you on staff. Senior trauma attending. Full privileges. I want you to build what you know into a program and teach it. The board will back it." Nora did not rush. She placed both hands on her knees, palms down. 3 conditions, she said. He nodded. 1. We integrate. Combat methods where they belong. Civilian protocol where it shines. We do not turn this place into a forward hospital. Agreed. 2. A clear path for medics and military clinicians to transition here. Not a courtesy, a true bridge. That will be a fight. I will make it mine. 3. No rank. No titles from before. In this building, I am Dr. Vale. Done, Cross said. The answer arrived without the delay that might have looked like calculation. Nora set the report down with care. She did not thank him for permission to do work she had already been doing. He did not expect her to. A knock at the door came as a single, confident tap. Rourke stood in the frame. He looked colorless but upright. A cane lived at his side because his balance was not sure yet. Ellie Park stood behind him, hair caught in a rubber band, eyes clear. Sam Ortiz was there as well, hands in his pockets, sleeves rolled to the elbow. "Heard voices," Rourke said. "Thought I would punch above my weight." His smile reached the place a smile is supposed to reach when it's earned. He moved into the room and leaned on the cane as if it had always been a choice and not a need. "You saved my life twice," he said to Nora. "Once in sand I do not want to see again, once under lights I can tolerate. If you are building a bridge for people like me, I want to help pour the concrete." Ellie stepped next. "I matched here," she said. Her face betrayed a small happiness that she allowed to exist. "I would like to learn the way you move." Sam lifted his chin. "I will train the scrub teams and nurses to anticipate like the street. Hands first, talk second." Cross looked from one to the other and then at Nora. She let her ring click once against her thumbnail. It made a sound that reminded her of a rail under a wheel. "Then we start," she said. 4 months turned an unused wing into a place with a pulse. The trauma simulation center smelled like plastic detergent and machine heat. Mannequins lay on gurneys with lines of vein under synthetic skin. A mock OR glowed under light a shade dimmer than ideal on purpose. Speakers carried a low hum, and then when a session began, layered noise into it until thought had to fight. A lecture hall faced a glass wall that allowed the residents to watch teams inside the sim bays. 34 seats filled. Some faces were older than their PGY would predict. 6 wore the posture of people who had learned to carry weight without showing it. Nora stood at the front with a marker in one hand. The board showed a sketch of a belly, the quadrants marked with quick lines. She spoke in sentences that carried image. "When the field is unhelpful, pack it. Pressure quadrant by quadrant, then unpack. Speed before elegance when blood is the clock. Fix pretty later." She changed markers and drew a heart with a small crescent around it. Ellie stood beside an ultrasound machine and froze an image with the same shape. The real and the drawn matched. "This is what a fusion looks like when your stomach says, 'It is not a heart attack,'" Nora said. "The picture is proof. Your hands get you there." They moved to the bays. Sam wore an old flight suit with a stitched name patch that had earned its thread. He ran a triage drill that made voices rise and drop in quick rhythm. Maya Chen stood at a station with instruments and time closures not for speed alone, but for reliability under tension. Residents worked in threes. They stumbled for the first 5 seconds that matter, and then they began to move. They called for tools, they forgot to breathe, they learned. In the observation corridor, Dr. Raymond Adu watched with arms loosely folded. He made notes that were more about people than about numbers. He said little and changed a great deal in the spaces where decisions got made. Visitors arrived that did not come with patients, a uniform cut and a clipped badge, a suit that did not come off the rack. They sat in the back and watched a session in which a team recognized tamponade by signs and got the needle to the right place in one push. Their faces did not give away much, but both stayed long enough to ask to speak after. "We want to send people to you," the one with the badge said. "And we want your people to come to us." The suit nodded as if the words had been rehearsed and still mattered. "We can talk," Nora said. "I am here first." They left with a folder of schedules and without a promise beyond that. On a Wednesday that started with sun on the lake and ended with a bank of gray, Jake Nolan walked into the sim hall in uniform. He moved like someone who had had a pain and then did not. He looked at the room filled with plastic bodies and wires and faces that concentrated in lines, then looked at Nora. "Ma'am," he said, then corrected himself. "Doctor, thank you." Nora let herself smile enough to shift her face. "Get yourself cleared for full duty before you do anything heroic." He laughed once, a short bark, and then nodded to the residents who had gathered to hear him. "I was dying because something small hid where the camera would not see it," he said. She found it with her hands. He let that live in the air and did not try to make a speech. He stayed for 10 minutes and left a better room behind. Late afternoon brought a lull. Light through the glass, threw bright stripes across the floor. Nora stood in the mock OR and adjusted a light head until the shadow fell just right on the foam chest. Ellie practiced tying a vertical mattress with the exact spacing Nora had shown. The thread lay in clean loops, the knot set flat. A tone sounded in the real ER. It began as a beep and then rolled into the full call. The words came through the ceiling and ran along the halls. Multi-vehicle collision on I-90, multiple critical, ETA 3 minutes. They did not look at one another as if needing permission. Nora picked up a pair of trauma shears and slid them into her pocket. She took the ring and turned it so the numbers pressed the skin. The metal touched the rail of a crash cart as they passed and made a single small sound. They came through the auto doors into air that tasted like outside. The unit lights came up, monitors woke. The hum of the building leaned forward on its toes. Nora went to meet the first gurney. The team fell in around her, and the rhythm found their feet. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story.